Hello, everyone. Picture this. A woman with honeyed skin and emerald eyes walks into a casting room, and the silence that follows is not out of hesitation, but awe. She would go on to become the face of L'Oréal, the muse of Givenchy, the embodiment of a new era in French fashion. But beauty, as she would learn, is not protection. It is exposure. At the peak of her fame, Noémie Lenoir vanished, not from the runway, but from life itself. A suicide attempt that shocked the industry, a quiet fall, the world never truly acknowledged. She was too radiant to be invisible, too fragile to stay in the light for long. This is not just the story of a model. It is the story of a woman who almost lost herself inside the image the world worshipped. Noémie Lenoir was born in 1979 in Les Ulis, a suburban neighborhood south of Paris, far from the polished catwalks and haute couture ateliers. Les Ulis was not a place where dreams of fashion were cultivated. It was concrete, immigrant, working class, a place where beauty could feel more like a burden than a gift. Her mother was from Réunion Island, a former cleaning lady. Her father, a French mainlander, worked as an electrician. Between them, they raised a daughter with striking contrast, wild curls, delicate cheekbones, a gaze that did not flinch. But Noémie was not taught to admire her own reflection. She was taught to survive. From an early age, she felt the weight of difference. Her skin, her heritage, her silence, all of it made her stand out in a place that did not always know what to do with difference. In school, she was tall, too quiet, too distant. The kind of child who did not chase attention, but attracted it anyway. She loved movement, dancing, climbing, playing alone in the woods near her housing estate. There was an energy to her, a restlessness that refused to be confined by her surroundings. But still, there was no plan, no blueprint, no clear path for what a girl like her could become. At home, life was strict but loving. Her mother tough, practical, insisted on discipline. Her father, more distant, taught her the silence of men who carry worry in their bones. Noémie learned early that softness was something you had to protect or lose. Then, at 16, it happened. She was spotted at a post office by a modeling scout. Just like that, no portfolio, no training, just a face too magnetic to ignore. The woman who discovered her asked a simple question: "Have you ever thought about modeling?" And Noémie, unsure if it was a joke or a miracle, said yes. But nothing changed overnight. She was still a girl from Les Ulis, still unsure of what it meant to be wanted for her looks, still doubting whether the world that had overlooked her so long would now suddenly open its doors. What she did not know was that her childhood, the quiet, the outsider status, the unfiltered survival had already shaped her for the industry ahead. She had seen the world's cruelty young. She had learned how to move through it without asking for permission. And soon, she would learn how to use beauty as both shield and sword. The first time Noémie Lenoir stepped into a real casting, she felt like a foreigner. Not just because of her accent or her origins, but because the space itself, white walls, clipped voices, pale bodies moving like whispers, felt like a world built without her in mind. She was 17, still raw, still half child, half woman, the girl from Les Ulis, standing in a Parisian studio, being told to smile without showing too much, walk without taking up space, pose, but not exist. She was not sure what they saw in her, only that they saw. And after years of being ignored or underestimated, that was a kind of electricity. Her first jobs were catalogs, small shoots, a few commercials. She did not arrive with the force of a headline. She slipped in quiet, elegant, watchful. But beneath her softness was something magnetic, something editors and casting directors could not name, but could not look away from. Then came the campaign. L'Oréal, it was not just a job, it was an arrival. She became the face of the brand global, unmistakable. Her image flooded magazines, billboards, TV screens. She became one of the few Black women to front a beauty brand of that scale. The industry framed it as diversity, progress. But for Noemie, it was more complicated. She knew she was being celebrated, but she also knew she was being used as a symbol, as a market strategy, as a moment. She was not naive. She understood the game. She smiled for the camera, then walked off set with her questions intact. She worked with Givenchy, Victoria's Secret, Gucci. She appeared in Sports Illustrated, walked for major designers. Her look, soft but strong, romantic but electric, became the signature of a new kind of French allure. But with each success came dislocation. Fashion took her far from Les Ulis, far from the world she knew. But it did not offer her a new home. She was praised, but rarely understood, embraced, but never fully welcomed. She began to feel the tension between the image she performed and the woman she was becoming. The industry saw beauty. She felt burden. The editor saw a muse. She saw a girl still unsure of who she was when the cameras stopped clicking. She once said, "I was living someone else's dream." It was not bitterness. It was clarity. Noemie was grateful. She had money, travel, exposure. But she also had loneliness, pressure, and the creeping realization that fame does not erase the feeling of being misplaced. In interviews, she was careful, polite, but always a little guarded, as if she knew that too much truth might unravel the fantasy she was being paid to uphold. Still, she kept working, kept showing up, because she was good at it, and because somewhere inside, a voice still whispered, "Maybe this is how you earn your place." But that voice was growing quieter, and another one deeper, older, more honest was preparing to speak. By the early 2000s, Noémie Lenoir was not just a successful model. She was a symbol of diversity, of French glamour, of what the fashion world claimed it wanted to become more inclusive, more modern, more bold. But Noemie was never just a symbol. She was a woman living in a world that often treated her like a metaphor instead of a human being. She was the face of L'Oreal, walking in the same league as Letitia Costa and Claudia Schiffer. She had the rare ability to move between high fashion and commercial without losing the core of her presence. Brands wanted her, editors loved her, cameras drank her in. On the runway, she was soft thunder, graceful but commanding. Whether it was Victoria's Secret or Gucci, she carried her walk like a secret, always hinting there was something deeper behind the movement. Her posture, her eyes, her timing, they were not just trained, they were felt. That was what made her stand apart. She did not act like a model. She moved like a woman who had lived and survived, and was still deciding what to do with her power. In photos, she could become anything: ethereal, seductive, distant, real. Her range was not a product of makeup or styling. It came from a place inside her, a chameleon soul shaped by watching, adapting, protecting. She made images unforgettable, not because she tried, but because she never fully surrendered herself to the frame. She graced the pages of Elle, Vogue, and Sports Illustrated. Her features, the mix of sharp and soft, of French elegance and Creole fire, were in high demand. She modeled alongside the most recognizable names in the world, but somehow, she always seemed like the one most aware of the performance they were all trapped in. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was also untranslatable. It refused to be simplified. That was her brilliance and her burden. The world told her she had arrived, that she was living the dream. But for Noemie, the dream often felt like an illusion, shiny, scripted, and exhausting. With every new shoot came new pressure. To maintain, to perform, to disappear behind the fantasy the industry needed her to be. There were no visible cracks yet, She was still smiling, still appearing at galas, still walking runways. But inside, something was beginning to shift. Not a collapse, a slow, silent unraveling. Because sometimes, the most beautiful peak is only the pause before the fall. Noémie Lenoir was never meant to fit the mold, and she knew it. The fashion world loved to frame her as a success story, a symbol of progress. A Black woman from the banlieues of France rising to walk among couture's elite. But the same world that praised her for being different refused to understand what that difference truly cost. She had to fight to exist in rooms that were never designed for her. Behind the smiles and the camera lights, there were constant negotiations with editors, with stylists, with agencies over how her hair should look, how dark her skin could appear, how French she was allowed to be. She once said, "They wanted me to be exotic, but not too Black, French, but not too real." It was not just a job. It was code switching at the highest level, a performance layered with silence. Noémie never shouted. She did not march, but she resisted in her own way by staying, by showing up, by refusing to become a caricature of herself. She kept her French accent, never softened it for comfort. She embraced her natural curls, even when pressured to conform. She turned down campaigns that exoticized her background. She said no, quietly but firmly, to 1,000 small indignities that most would never notice and fewer would speak about. Her biggest act of defiance was that she remained entirely herself, even when that self was tired or lost or unsure. But the industry does not reward difference forever. It commodifies it, uses it, then moves on. As the years went on, she watched as new faces, often younger, paler, louder, arrived to take her place. Her legacy was never acknowledged the way it should have been. She was the first in many rooms. But no one asked how that felt, what it took, what it left behind. She began to speak, slowly, about the toll, about how being beautiful had become a kind of trap, about how she felt invisible the moment she stepped off the stage. "I was tired of pretending," she said in an interview, "tired of smiling when I was not okay." Those words were not dramatic, they were revolutionary. Because in an industry built on illusion, truth is always the most dangerous thing a woman can offer. Noémie never burned bridges. She did not declare war. She just told the truth. And that, in the world she came from, was the loudest rebellion of all. On May 9, 2010, the headlines did not say supermodel. They said suicide attempt. Noémie Lenoir had been found unconscious in a park near her home in La Celle-Saint-Cloud, outside Paris. Empty pill bottles, a swirling cocktail of despair and exhaustion. She had tried to disappear quietly, tragically, under the weight of a life that had grown too heavy. The world gasped, then moved on. But for Noémie, the days that followed were not headlines. They were silence, embarrassment, shame, the harsh unspoken judgment that follows any woman who cracks in public. She survived, physically, but something in her spirit had already gone numb long before that afternoon. In interviews later, she spoke with heartbreaking clarity. "I had been through a lot," she said. "I wanted to die. I had no more strength." It was not one event, not one betrayal. It was accumulation, years of pressure, of pretending, of carrying an image that fed others while starving herself. A toxic relationship, a custody battle, a fading spotlight, all of it crashing down in a single devastating moment. The fashion world offered no grace, no statement of support, no collective reckoning. She was, for a time, treated like a liability. Bookings slowed, calls stopped. The very industry that had once held her up now looked the other way. Noémie stepped back. She stopped chasing relevance. She stopped performing the kind of wellness the world demanded from women like her, poised, glowing, untouched by pain. Instead, she began again. Quietly, in her own way, she focused on her son, Kellyan, the one constant in her life. She found peace in motherhood, in routines, in slowness. She took smaller jobs, commercials, occasional shoots. but there was no longer a hunger for fame, only a desire for balance. Over time, she started speaking out not loudly, not theatrically, but truthfully, about mental health, about the invisible burden of being both desired and dismissed, about how even the most beautiful women can feel entirely alone. She did not become a cautionary tale. She became something rarer. A survivor, Noemie never tried to make the world pity her, only to understand that behind every perfect photo, there can be a storm. And she was done hiding hers. She did not leave with a farewell walk. No retrospective cover, no grand goodbye. And yet, Noémie Lenoir remains not because of her face, but because of the questions she forced us to ask. What happens when beauty is not enough to protect you? What does survival look like when the world only wants your surface? Her legacy is not a list of campaigns or magazine covers. It is the quiet courage of choosing life when death felt easier. It is the strength to tell the truth in an industry addicted to illusion. She opened doors without demanding credit. She endured pain without turning it into performance. She lived through the collapse of the fantasy and came out softer, sharper, more whole. And maybe that is the lesson she leaves behind. That beauty means nothing if it cannot hold your soul. That sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is walk away. That healing is not glamorous, but it is sacred. Noémie Lenoir did not fade. She transformed. And while fashion may have moved on, her silence, her fall, and her return remain like a quiet thread stitched into the fabric of what the industry now calls inclusivity. She may never walk those runways again, but her shadow is still there, watching, waiting, and reminding us what it costs to be the first.